Hey guys, this is Brett Young, Taylor Young, and Rod Erb, and you're tuned in to the Be Extraordinary podcast with Erb and Young. Real conversations about business, leadership, and personal development.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. I think that was from The Truman Show, but we're going to steal it today. This is Brett Young. I am with my man and the legend himself, Mr. Taylor Young, my older brother from another mother, Mr. Rod Erb with me, and we've got a special guest with us today, Mr. Torey Scarbrough in the house. So if you are driving, be careful. Don't get too excited, but when you get to where you're going, you might want to take a park and listen to the rest of this, because if you're on a journey for development, if you're on a journey of a transcendence in your career, if you're looking for something more and you want to get some nuggets from just that may unlock the door, you're going to speak and get a chance to listen to a guy today that has done all of the above. Mr. Torey Scarbrough, just to give you kind of a background, guys, in regards to who he is, he was the top producer multiple years in a row here within the Orlando office for Erb and Young. He's one of ours, and he's a dear person to the three of us from a personal level, but from a professional level. Where Torey came into this organization for where he is today is such a perfect example of what happens when you commit to personal development, when you commit to yourself, when you commit to doing the thing and swinging the axe and chopping the tree. So I'm really excited to unpack what all that means, not only just to showcase your story and where you are in your career, which is extremely exciting, but also for the listener that's thinking, maybe where I am today isn't exactly where I want to be. And what does that look like to bridge the gap? And also, I think that's very relevant to the story is maybe where you are today, you don't know where you want to be. You might not know what that looks like. But to me, your story is such a perfect example of somebody that just shows up every day and does the thing, and then opportunities present themselves. So to catch everybody up, Torey set out on an incredible journey. What now, 4 months ago now?
4 months.
4 months.
4 months. I think 4, and we're going into 5.
4 months going into 5. So we have this new independent operator program that's been brewing in the lab that we haven't been talking about very much yet. But Torey is one of the three individuals that took the leap of faith to take this journey with us, a program that the three of us could not be more excited about, with what it means not only to the company, but what it means to making an impact with our mission. And Torey raised his hand and said he wanted to be that third person. And so we're 4 months in on that journey, almost 5. And the profoundness of that practice of going from entry-level position, never been in insurance, to top producer within the entire company, multiple years, multiple years, and then that transition to now entrepreneur and having a completely new set of identity, and what that means for your future, what that means to your daily activity, what that means to your own personal accountability, what that means to what the span and scope of what you do, is just such a cool reflection of what it means to be on this development journey. So, man, I know that's long-winded, but I just wanted to give you the proper edification. I always tell you all the time, Torey's my hero, just because I think, to give you an example, Torey, and we can talk about this because he's cool with this, but I think when you came to work here, I think you were close to 300 pounds when you came to work here.
Yeah, there was 265.
And today he's fit. He just looks like a completely different person. The vibrancy of him, the posture, the level of just
manness.
It's the way that he carries himself is just such of confidence. And so it's reflective on the inside, but it's also been reflective on the outside. And there's just no mistake of the work that you've put in every single day to get to where you are. So I'm just super excited to have you on the show, man. Thanks for being here.
I appreciate you guys, man. Trust me, it's an honor on my side as well. So thank you.
I know Taylor was talking about how weird it was that you walked in. So those of you that are joining us, Torey just opened up his own office, his own Erb and Young office, part of this independent operator program in Tampa. Shout out to Tampa.
That's right, baby.
Oh, shout out to Tampa.
We're here.
That's right. What is it called? Champions Bay? What do you call it?
Title Town.
Title Town. That's two.
You have your season tickets to the Bucks yet?
No, man. But I'm planning on a suite. That's what I want to do.
Yeah,
I'm trying to convince my girlfriend's parents.
Stephanie's loving that.
Let's get closer to the field. What do you guys say?
So he just opened that office about 4 or 5 months ago, and he's not here in the office in Orlando anymore. And if you know the Orlando office, Torey is the staple of the Orlando office.
Right.
He is here early and he left late. I mean, there was probably him and Eric Atzma, like I feel like they both had sleeping bags here, at different points of their career, just because they just love what they do, and they're just perfect examples of people that are just hungry. We have to kick them out all the time and tell them that you got to go home. So, but yeah, it's weird to not see you in here all the time. And then today, it's super refreshing to see Torey in the building.
It's cool though. It's cool when you come back in. There's still that sense of community. You come back. I just said it before we got on the air. I came in, I was like, it's kind of, you have this initial apprehension because I haven't been here in 4 months. But then you come inside and, the synergy's still there. The team atmosphere is still there. So it's kind of just, that uncle that came home for Christmas, walked in. It was cool.
Uncle Torey.
Yeah. Uncle Torey.
I think that the nickname just that's going to stick.
Hey guys, Brett Young with the Be Extraordinary podcast. I want to take a moment and just say thank you so much for listening. Without you guys listening, this wouldn't be possible. Appreciate you guys so much. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, everywhere. You can also go to beextraordinarypodcast.com and all of the feed, you can watch the video playbacks and subscribe to any whichever podcast feed that you enjoy most. Lastly, if you've not joined the Be Extraordinary community, please go to the bottom of the website. Go to beextraordinarypodcast.com. Go to the bottom. You will see the Extraordinary community right there through Telegram. You literally just click the button. It's free. There's a bunch of other amazing professionals and individuals that live by this philosophy, having incredible dynamic conversations about what they experience every day and becoming better. So again, thank you so much for listening. You guys rock. Be extraordinary.
So, hey man, so bring us in, right? Brett highlighted on a lot, the cliff notes of you coming in, background, give us the cliff notes of your last 10 years, man. I know from my vantage point, you're somebody that's come in and just really transformed their life. I think Brett said it best. Just every part of you has just shifted in a way that you've willed it to and wanted it to. And I've gotten a front row seat the whole time, working with you very directly the whole time. And so give us the cliff notes of your last 10 years and take us to now and kind of what those challenges, those excitements, and all that good stuff.
It's a big gap. I would probably say that Brett uses a really good term that I've heard you say before, and I've always used this. I kind of borrowed it to describe myself, but I was a pretender. I was a pretender when I first started out. I come from an acting background, so I was a performing arts major, inherently talented. But one thing I've learned, especially in the last 10 years, is that hard work and effort beats talent every single time. So I was talented, but I didn't have the drive. I didn't have the effort or the will to put in the hard work. So when you go into an industry like, acting, and you want to be a film actor, TV actor, stage actor, doesn't matter. It's so saturated with talent. And as I've gotten older, the people who I really, really appreciate are the ones who I remember who maybe didn't feel like they were as talented, but they worked harder. And those are the ones who are still doing it now when I go on social media. They continuously developed. Even though they didn't inherently probably have it, maybe to them, maybe to other people, they worked hard and they kept at it. I initially, when I was younger, I didn't work hard. I wasn't a hard worker. I don't have this background of being somebody who put in effort 110% of the time. I kind of coasted by a lot of times based on the back of being somebody who can do impressions, somebody who can act on stage, somebody who can do all that.
Naturally funny.
Yeah, thank you.
Engaging.
I appreciate that.
Can connect with people.
Yeah, your words, man. I appreciate that. But it was, for me, going into that industry, going to New York City, auditioning, going to North Carolina, auditioning, trying to do stage, trying to do film, TV. I remember going to New York one time, and it was December, and I went to bed. It was 50 degrees. I probably told you the story. I woke up, and it was -5. A polar vortex came through, and I had to walk to this church to go audition for this off-Broadway show. I'm buttoned up to here, and I remember going, God, this is terrible. Like, I wasn't ready to put in the work to get where I needed to be. Fast track that to starting here, you get exposed very quickly when you're around great people. If you're not putting in the work. So I think I've realized very quickly when I started, and it took me a little bit, probably, you could probably attest to that. But what I realized very quickly was, okay, something's got to change here. You know, something has to change, whether it's putting in more hours or learning more skills, which I definitely subscribe to that now with, you know, stacking your skills. But when I first started, I was pretending. You can only get by on, you know, being funny and being talented so much if you're not progressing, if you're not developing. And one of the things that you guys had always talked about, and we talk about to this day, is personal development. So what are you going to put in to, you know, if everyone's growing past you, you know, you're going to get left behind and you're going to quit, or you're going to go find something else to do and continuously, you know, one step forward, two steps back. So I think when I started here after maybe about a year, you know, I had great people around me, and I said, man, let's change something here. Let's start with a book. Let's start with go an extra hour, come in an hour early or leave an hour late. Let's try to make one more dial. My whole thing was always just do one thing a little bit more every day or every week or whatever the case was, and let's stack it. Let's see where we are at the end. And I still do that to this day.
Which is fascinating because, and I want to unpack that because I know you and Taylor have had some fun conflict along the way, because it was like this battle of this old identity, you know, transitioning to this new one. And it doesn't come without a lot of friction, right? So I think if you're listening to this podcast, you know, this didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like, all right, well, I just made the decision and then that's who I was. And I do have to preface, I think if I use the word pretender, I definitely borrowed it from Rod. You know, I think on his Instagram it says professional, I think
ex-pretender.
Ex-pretender. Yeah. So if I used it, I definitely stole it. So, but if you steal something enough times, you can now claim it as your own. So, you know, maybe I'll just claim that on air, but no, I think that was Rod. But so let's unpack that for a second, because I think I put up a post. I don't know. I think it was a couple days ago about being tough. Like, I used to be really soft. And I think it's a learned skill to be tough. You can't just make a decision that I'm going to be tough. It doesn't happen that way. And I think in the same breath, I think that's transferable to a lot of different things. So you're wanting to become this different person that does that extra thing, that slight edges it every day. By the way, if you haven't read The Slight Edge, it's probably, of the four people sitting here, it's probably our favorite book. Period, staple. Hands down. Easily, it's a staple. Yeah. And so embodying those principles doesn't happen overnight, you know. And there was a time where there was this transition going, you know, on where the desire to be that new person was great, but the execution of that lagged. And I'll let you guys commentary, but I know that there was some times when just even, you know, now you're the person that shows up early and stays late, but there was a time when you couldn't make 9 o'clock. You couldn't even make the time.
Yeah. No, that's such a good, I'm glad we're going there. Cause it was like 9 o'clock was a big to do. It made me such a better leader, man. Cause I was scratching my head and I'm like, man, this guy's talented. He wants it, but damn, to get him here by 9. And I was so rigid back then.
We're talking about practice.
Amateur leader of any kind, and still am to some extent. But man, you really challenged me in that regard. But then all of a sudden, it was like there was a turning point where there was the want to was like, no, I want to be. I don't want to just be the guy that comes in at 9:15 and has 10, like that you just articulated. And then you fast forward. And the journey is like, now you're one of the most disciplined people I know. So somebody who transformed wherever they were lacking and made a commitment and then stacked along the way. You know, you fast forward however many years, you're literally one of the most disciplined people.
I think that point in time too, right? It's like you had that day of decision. I feel like that day of decision came 2 or 3 years in, like you said, right? Yeah. Brett, you opened your reference, Torey's swinging the axe and chopping the tree. But there was that day of decision that said, man, I got to start sharpening this thing. Yeah. And I think that was kind of your entry into, let me just read one book. That's what I remember. Let me read one book, as weird as this is, right? And I think everybody kind of goes through those phases when they join us. They like, you guys read books together? That's weird.
Yeah, this is cool that you guys do it. I buy it. It's awesome. It's fun. I'd like to be part of it. But to participate into the point where I believe and I embody it,
and I think it's going to benefit me,
and I believe that it's going to benefit me as a different perspective.
But you're talking about an identity shift. You know, that's what I'm still going through it. You know, it's never ending process. But the memories that you hold on to from back that time, there's a reason why you probably hang on to them. And I'll tell the story. very briefly, but I think The Slight Edge, which I know we've already repped it, but invaluable to this day, the only personal development book I ever cried to when I read it, because it made me look inside at other things that I hadn't thought of. And to your point about personal development and making that one decision, I like it that somebody, or even I speak for myself, that I came in not reading those books, because I think going from fiction to nonfiction, and then all of a sudden you have this big shift because you're seeing, you know, they have merit. The things in the books have merit, and I can take those and use those. The Slight Edge was a big deal for me. That's one memory. And the other memory is I remember laying in bed, I think it was my first year, and woke up at 10:15 in the morning. I had work at 8:30. And my phone's on my chest. I didn't set my alarm. Who knows what happened? And Matt's called me. He's a guy we work with. Matt's called me 10 times. Taylor's called me 5. And the phone's vibrating, and Matt's calling me for the 11th time. And I answered it, and you could just tell he's depressed. He's just bummed that, you know, he recruited me, and I was kind of wavering between being there on time, not being there on time. I remember that memory. And to this day, I don't know why it still sticks in my head, probably because I was disappointed in myself. And I think going through that internally and then reading a book like The Slight Edge, those two are, to me, hand in hand, to where you're going, I don't want to feel that disappointment anymore. I don't want to feel that I'm letting somebody down, mainly myself, because you said you wanted it. You have all the talent to make it work. We all do. But you're just not, what are you not doing? What are you not giving? And I think it comes back to what I said earlier about the effort. You know, you can only skate by on talent so long. If you're not developing, if you're not putting in the work on yourself, which we now know is what the personal development side of it is, if you're not working on yourself, if you're not growing, you're dying. We've always said that. So that decision for me, those two memories, to kind of parlay that into what we're talking about, I think it's those two, man. Having that disappointment, coming in and having to apologize for something I shouldn't have happened in the first place, and then reading that book, and something just kind of sparked and said, okay, let's just do this. Let's just do one thing. And then all of a sudden it snowballs.
How much?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to ask you, how much of that was, you know, what's beautiful about that book is it makes it frames it in a way that it's not that big of a deal. It frames it in a way that you're not taking this quantum big step, right? It frames it in a way that it's like, you're this close, man. Yep. Like, it's not that big. Like, it's just a little bit, right? It's just a little bit. How much of that, and I hear two things. I hear an experience, and then I hear book knowledge, right? Married together creates transformation. It's not enough to just read the book, but it's also not enough to just go out and get your ass kicked, right? Because then you can't quantify what it means. You can't place it onto a backdrop of a framework that allows you to create meaning from the experience. It's just a negative experience instead of it becoming something that's powerful, right? Like, so I look at that as a great example of, if as a leader you're trying to create any type of experience for somebody, number one, allow them to drive off the road a little bit and have some pain, but then also equip them with something to where that will mean something. Like, right? It will allow them to have a compass, per se, to say, hey, look, by the way, this is something you might want to check out. It could help with this. And at the point where you're like, geez, man, I got to try something because this hurts really bad. You know, It's almost like the humility of when stuff happens to where we're not happy with ourselves is the place in which we're open to change. And until we're broken and until we're, you know, vulnerable enough, it's like we can't receive what anybody wants to give us in the first place, you know?
Yeah. I would agree with that. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't know if you wanted to comment on that.
I just think it was, you mentioned the book. You know, I came from a position where you think there are quantum leaps in life. You know, you think there are, you can win the lottery, you know, you can hit the jackpot. It's possible.
Audition, you know,
you can get the audition. Yeah. You can go up against the big break. You think the big break. No kidding, right? That's what you come from in acting, and everybody thinks, I'm going to get my big break. And the one thing about that book, what it did humble me, and I know it's probably not, you know, humble to say that, but it did humble me because he says there are no quantum leaps. There's only 1% better every day. So the identity shift for me was, okay, stop looking for the big thing that can happen that I can, well, it's someday will come. It'll happen to me one day. One day we'll get there. maybe, but if you're not doing these little disciplines, just this little discipline of 1%, you might not even see that opportunity because you're not going to make it to work on time and you're going to get fired. Or you might not, you might not be able to make the extra dial that might have been that one that puts you over the top in sales, whatever the case is. Yeah. So that was a big shift for me, going from, okay, let's look for that one big break to, okay, instead of that, let's just focus every day on getting better and making myself better, and then the opportunity will come.
How about that? Fast forward, everything you just said is incredible, but then also there's this moment at our leadership summit that we have every year. To give context, I think you're 3 or 4 years in at this point, where you've transitioned from I don't know insurance to a service role to a sales role, but you're still not crushing it in sales. You're not the top producer yet. And Rod does his sales training like he does most years and always lights it up. And tell me about that story, because I think that was an interesting day of decision as well, when you're talking about how you got in, but then there was also like, no, I don't want to just participate. Something just spoke to me about his training, and I want to be the top producer and stop pretending. Yeah. Do you remember that? You too? I remember that vividly at a distance. Vividly.
I remember that I forget where I heard it. Now, of course, I know it, but I'll never be able to tell you who said it. But times plus reps equals opportunity, I believe is the quote. Am I saying that right? And so nothing happens overnight. Now we've already established that. So now you get 3 or 4 years down the line. And one year you did the sales training, and I remember saying, I took a picture of it and I said, I'm going to take that, I'm going to put it on the back of my monitor.
Soup to nuts.
Yeah, soup to nuts. I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it on my monitor screen. And I just made that decision at the summit, at our leadership summit that year. And then we were at dinner, and Rod saw me sitting there, and I think he saw an opportunity, saw a chair open. He came over, and Rod's just, anybody who knows Rod knows he's going to be honest with you, but he cares. He wants to see what you're going through. He wants to give you his experience and his knowledge. And he was, to say the least, he was he was curt with me about what I was going through. He was curt.
I don't think I've heard that in a conversation. By the way, I don't know if I've heard that in a conversation, but I can tell you right now, that is the first time that word has been said on air. Curt.
He is curt with me.
I don't even know what that means. I just know it in the context of what
Siri,
you're saying.
what does curt mean?
Yeah. I don't want to say, because it wasn't brutal. I think the conversations we had was that it's okay to want to be successful.
Yes, I remember that.
It's okay to want to be competitive, even though we have a really good team atmosphere. And I love competition. But at the time, I was only competing. It wasn't, at the time, it was Matt, you, and I, that we were all kind of competing with in terms of sales. But Matt and I's relationship was it was borderline toxic, because we were still in that bartender mentality that we compete, and where it's not a build somebody up.
A lot of cutting.
It's a lot of cutting.
Yeah.
And what you had talked about with me was that, you're not going to be the next Matt Ekberg. Same, I think about with acting now. You're not going to be the next Tom Hanks. Just be Torey Scarbrough. And so having that freedom to say, okay, what does that look like? Now you get to create it, as opposed to trying to copy somebody else in the office that you can't do what they do. But what do I do well? So I think that conversation with Rod, more than anything, gave me the freedom to develop whatever my style was and what I wanted to do.
Man, I remember that too. I didn't even think about that, but you're bringing back memories. I remember being in conversations when we would do like even a review. Yeah. And it was always, it's so funny, we were just having this conversation this morning. It was always it was always the team, and it was always in this all-encompassing, what I want doesn't matter. It's all about what everybody else does, and how I fit in. Yep. And it's so funny, because I'm on the other side going, man, he's just a big team guy. It's not important to him. And Rod's on the other side going, bullshit. I call bullshit. Like, no, that's not true. Everybody has certain things that they want, and it's okay to have selfish wants and what you need, because that's what the team needs. The team is a makeup of all individual things people want, but yet collectively we're all able to move in the same direction, which is so funny, because we just had this conversation at breakfast, and it's almost like two opposite sides of the table, and now they've kind of flipped, which is cool that there's just different vantage points coming from different people. But that is such a shift, because at some point or another, I believe he called you out to say, that's bullshit, Torey. Torey's got wants. Torey's got diseases. And by the way, it is okay. And to the point even further, you're being selfish that you won't acknowledge the fact that you have desires, needs, and wants, and it's not always about the team. It can be about you some of the time. And I think at that point in time, there was just this shift. Almost, it was overnight.
Yep.
We had our summit. We hung out all night and partied. And when you went to bed that night and when you woke up the next day, I swear to God, it was
Not all night.
human.
We got some sleep.
It was like the resurrection of this different identity, man.
Hey guys, Brett Young with the Be Extraordinary podcast. I want to take a moment and just say thank you so much for listening. Without you guys listening, this wouldn't be possible. Appreciate you guys so much. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, everywhere. You can also go to beextraordinarypodcast.com and all of the feed, or you can watch the video playbacks and subscribe to any whichever podcast feed that you enjoy most. Lastly, if you've not joined the Be Extraordinary community, please go to the bottom of the website. Go to beextraordinarypodcast.com. Go to the bottom. You will see the Extraordinary community right there through Telegram. You literally just click the button. It's free. There's a bunch of other amazing professionals and individuals that live by this philosophy, having incredible dynamic conversations about what they experience every day and becoming better. So again, thank you so much for listening. You guys rock. Be extraordinary.
I'm listening to you recall it, Torey, and I remember how respectful you were, and I was that was kind of your MO. I remember when you interviewed. We were sitting in the old boardroom, the old conference room. Yeah. And you started talking about the fact that it wasn't about money, and I disagreed with you then. I said I don't believe that. I think it absolutely is. Why are you here? Right? You're here for money, and whether or not we had that organized at that time, over the years that played itself out. And I'm listening to you recall that, and I remember how respectful you were, but it was me calling you out, as if to say, you've got all these skills, you've got all this talent, and I don't believe that you're just here to just kind of contribute on a mediocre level, right? Yeah. And I don't mean a call out in a disrespectful way, but I mean a call out as if to say, man, there's more in there. It's like, people talk about 110%. It's like, no, you just have 100. Just give it all, right? Just give 100. Yeah. You don't have to play games and try to think there's 110 in there. There's not. There's only 100. Just give 100. And I think it was that permission to say, here's what I know I'm capable of this. I know that I've got flashes of this. It's like, figure out.
I think you were giving him a permission, and I believe this was early in my career when we were running together. It was like, because I was the same way, and it genuinely wasn't. Money wasn't like it. It still is not the driver, but at some point it was almost like to where the fact that I wouldn't even acknowledge that it was a thing.
Yep.
Because it was this taboo thing where I would it doesn't have to be your main driver, but you should. Like a mature human in this game of business, recognizing that money is a thing, right? Mm-hmm. And where I would never acknowledge it because it was all about the other stuff, and I felt like, well, I can't ever say that because that's just not, that makes me selfish and da-da-da-da. It's like, but then there comes this transformative process where you become secure enough to go. It says, no. By me making more and being better, I'm helping everybody else around me. Right. So the ideas of this being taboo is completely bullshit, right? Like, and I relate to that because, man, I went through that shift, and I feel like that was you were almost poking the bear, not to say like, hey man, this is about, it's about money because, to make the point that it is about money, because that's not our culture at all. That's not what we preach at all. But to the point where that's what you need. He knew that that's what you needed to hear in order to go there and sit there long enough to realize that like, hey man, this is okay. This is all right, man. This is fun. Let's acknowledge this for a second because this is part of the journey. Right. And I think that was a cool coaching moment. I think it was impactful.
It was impactful for me because you mentioned maturity. That's how I feel the whole 10 years have been, and giving you the freedom to say, hey, be selfish, focus on you. And in the beginning, it was kind of just, the team atmosphere, the culture, and, it's a buzzword, but that's what drew me in. Yeah. And then you think, okay, that's what I'm going to do to stay. What I'm going to do to stay is just focus on being a team player, focus on being a culture fit, and don't worry about the money. The money will come. Well, the money doesn't come if you don't put the work in to get the money. And if I do well, going back to what you mentioned, and he said this, I don't remember exactly your words, but he said, you're trying to succeed for the next person. Because if you don't do it, then the next person who comes in
right.
doesn't think they can do it.
Yeah.
And so you got to live up to not what everybody thinks that you can be, but what you think you can be, or what you know.
I think that ties back nicely into what you said earlier about talent, right? I think every time I hear somebody talk about talent, I think about golf. And I think about how many guys that play professional golf have just truckloads of talent, but they miss the development part.
It's like me.
Exactly. I mean, the shots I've seen you hit, man, it's like there's just there's truckloads. There's so much talent that there's probably spare, right? But when I think of when you take that talent and you don't pair it with the right development, that's when you start hearing guys, man, he had so much talent. He had so much talent. He could have been so good. And I think what's nice about the way we acknowledge talent and have always acknowledged talent, because we have such a hunger for development, I think that's been the tie-in that I've seen out of you when I reference, you're swinging the axe now, you're chopping any tree that stands in front of you, but that acknowledgement of my talent's only going to get me so far. Now I've got to learn how to pair my mental game. Again, a golf term. You got to be strong mentally to play golf.
Yeah.
You had to, same thing as personal development. You have to apply personal development in order for that talent to work for you long term. And I think for me, all this ties back to, even the conversation ties back to the fact that everybody saw talent. Matt saw talent when he said, "Hey man, you got to meet this guy," right? Matt's talking to Brett Taylor and I. You got to meet this guy. He's great. And the minute we met you, to take a term out of Nick Patty's book, right? You were an OKG. We knew you were our kind of guy right away. But then that's when the first couple of years of just existing and being the funny, talented guy, and everybody wanted to be around you. Your energy was great. But I think the point you reference up into that conversation is the fact that you realize the talent was only going to get you so far, which to me is great. So many people don't, right? They just think, I got talent, it'll just carry me forever. And then when it doesn't, they're pissed off at something that probably
external.
Right. It's like so that's I like that we started around the talent conversation, because that to me, I mean, name people that, I mean, you could name 1,000 people that that have talent in basketball. Anything we've ever done, there's people all over the place loaded with talent, actors that were loaded with talent. Yeah. But why weren't they able to continue the growth, or why weren't they able to transition to the next level or level up and continue to level up and get to a point where you can stack skills? It's because the personal development or the mental game just wasn't priority enough.
Yeah, transparently, if I was going to be vulnerable and tell you guys, there was a moment where I told myself, I'm not going to be a what if. I'm not going to be what if he just put this together? What if he had just, I already kind of I'd been through that in acting. A lot of people back home, which I'm from Orlando, a lot of people probably thought, I'm just speaking for myself, but a lot of people probably thought, hey, he's going to make it. He's going to go do something. So there was a period in my life where you're going, okay, that's not going to happen. Whether it's because of my own choices, whether it's because of external factors, whatever the case is, I just don't want to do this. But now you feel almost, when I was younger, you're letting people down. So then you get to another avenue where you said, okay, I'm going to pivot and I'm going to go do this, which is, you're going from, you work in hospitality as an actor. So when you go from working from noon to midnight, and you get up back at 11, go to work at noon, it's a different schedule when you're going from 8:30 to 5:36, whatever the case is. Yeah. So there was a big shift there, and I was struggling with that. And so you were obviously a huge part of that. Taylor was a huge part. Brett, to some extent, and also in the beginning, and also Matt, But there was a point where I asked myself, are you going to be a what if? Because if you keep on the path that you're going on, and the Slight Edge poses that question to you at the end too. What if you don't do 1% better every day? What does that look like? And you see that curve go down. That was big for me.
That's crazy. And then, to fast forward from that conversation, you were in the pursuit of skills too, right? Hey, what are these people doing that are producing more than me?
Yeah.
Okay. Clearly Rod's got a sales pedigree and has had a ton of success. What if I just, his training, I get it. What if I just did that? What if I did the training? Not just listen to the training and take the notes and then kind of try to do it my way, right? He says in his training, say less to more people. Okay, what if I did that? Could I have more conversations? Could I be a better problem solver? So you're pursuing skills, and then all of a sudden you go, boom. I think it was 3 or 4 years in a row that you were the top producer in the company, and then I think for personal lines it might have been longer than that. But that jump was incredible. And then it just became something that you did, and you started to level up.
And then that was just the standard.
And that was just the standard. And you actually created the standard for yourself, and then you started setting the standard for others that they're starting to chase you. So I think that was a remarkable transcendence of you as a professional.
I think about what's cool too is you think about activity, you think about learned knowledge, activity knowledge, modeling knowledge, and then teaching knowledge, right? And you're kind of at the point now where you've toggled between modeling, being modeled by everybody in here, right? They all knew they came in, they had big shoes to fill. And now you're in a position now to where if you were to ever talk to any of those guys, you're in more of a teaching mode, which I think
Uncle Torey.
Uncle Torey, man.
Uncle Torey's back.
But real quick, and then the sales thing's like, okay, done. Yeah, I could probably sell in my sleep. But then all of a sudden this opportunity comes to be able to lead a team. Wow, never done that before.
Right.
You know, what's that look
Here
like?
in Orlando.
Here in Orlando, right? Somebody exits and starts their own business within a business, and then all of a sudden opportunity comes and there's this leadership muscle that you never flex. I thought you made that transition with such humility, but then you go about that. So tell us about that transition from sales to leadership. Was there a challenge there? Was it natural to be able to still be able to produce at a high level like you did, but also have a responsibility to lift the entire team in the vehicle and serve your teammates?
I think it's always, I hesitate to say challenge, but I'll say that it can be challenging. I think my whole 10 years has been a series of lifestyle changes or inherent changes where, okay, I'm a big proponent of modeling. You've mentioned modeling knowledge. I don't have to know it myself, but I need to go find somebody who does know it. I just listened to a podcast on the way here, Alex Hormozy, talking about just, the 4 traits of an entrepreneur.
Listen to the same one on the way.
Yeah,
right?
he was like, just go find somebody who's doing it. Get around those people and let them teach you, and then now you know it. Now you go. And
Amen
you go
to that.
do it, and you can model it. So I had you, I had Matt, I had Brett, Rod, I had people around me outside of podcasts and books and all that who had already been there and already done it. I still talk about it to this day. I just model somebody else. Just to borrow that, stand on their shoulders, and then go do it. And if somebody else behind me comes up and they do it better, perfect. At the end of the day, great.
God, can we keep Lorenzo, wherever this is in the podcast, dude, that is like, can we make a short clip of that and then just post that every single fucking day for the next 2 weeks? Like, that is just, dude, the simplicity of that statement and the practicality of the way that you've done it, it just boils it down to the point where there's just nothing left but that. There's just nothing left but that, and it's like, I mean, dude, that's a 4-hour seminar that you just gave in 30 seconds. Okay, thanks for coming. See you later. And you live it, man, and you live it. I just appreciate that.
And you demystify it, right? This is what you're saying. You demystify it. Well, somebody's already done it. It's just simple. Oh, let's just go borrow, and then I'll do it, and then I'll learn. And then, but what's amazing, and now fast forward, then you get the leadership thing. You're in a great position. You're making good money. You got a big team. I mean, just it's good.
Everybody
Right?
knows.
You've worked hard for this. We just referenced your history and everything that you put in, the leveling up, the skill stacking, et cetera. And now you're in kind of the spot that you'd probably set out to say, hey, one day, wouldn't it be cool if?
Well, I mean, to your point, he went back to zero.
Well, then
Let's call it what it is.
right, and then to make that decision to have something that you've built and you've worked hard for to go back to zero. But before we go there and your kind of journey as an entrepreneur and building a business within a business, which is going to be the best part of this podcast, you were also somebody that came into a couple years ago. I remember we were having conversations where you're like, yeah, man, you didn't grow up with that entrepreneurial spirit.
No.
You didn't grow up with that background where you're just one of those guys that goes, yeah, it just doesn't matter what it is. I've been selling newspaper and ice cream cones on the sidewalk, right? Just didn't have one of those stories. You're more like, yeah, I don't even know. That's tax deductible. Like, what does that mean? Tell me about that. Like, you didn't have that entrepreneur, like, I got to be my own business owner one day, but then you kind of had this openness after you've had some success of like, okay, interesting. Yeah, it doesn't sound like me, but all right, well, what's that person doing? Well, what would that look like? And it just seemed like you had a curiosity that parlayed into an opportunity that you're now in. So
that's a cool transition, because I just to summarize my perception of your experience, and I'm projecting, so I fill in the details, but looking for something meets a roadblock where you said, okay, you know what, at some point this isn't going to happen with the acting thing. My decision, where I'm at in my life, what I'm willing to do. I'm looking for something. Find the insurance business. More importantly, I would argue that you found a group of people that you wanted to do it with, which I think is way more important than the actual what you're doing. And then entry-level position, learning the business. Then move into a service role, which was a heavy service role at the time. I think it was the only service position in the entire company at that point, right? Like you were handling all of it, right?
We had a closing coordinator.
Yeah,
and
you were doing all the service.
Commercial was you guys.
Yep. So I think, and then you moved from service to the closing coordinator. You were doing both positions. And I mean, basically, for those of you that are listening at home, like, and if you're a team member on Urban Young today, like, take two people's jobs
and give them both to Torey and then some.
And that would be your job back in the day, because we all did 3 jobs, but
kept asking for more too.
That's right. We just figured it out. And then you transition to go, okay, I'm going to do sales. It's a sales thing. Okay. When I didn't even think I was a sales type person, right?
Yes.
Which is, there's a pattern here. And then you get into that seat and you weren't really aggressive. That's part of the reason that you weren't really having as much success. There was more of a, I'm in a service mode, right? Hospitality, service modes, your personality, team guy, us. There wasn't this level of attack, and then go through a transition where you're like, all right, let me model. Same type of situation. I'm going to model. Then you got that edge, right? And then you got that edge. Then you refined to the core of like, man, it's okay for me to want some stuff for me as long as it helps the team. As a matter of fact, that helps the team even more. Boom. All of a sudden, now you got that edge. You go to the top of the game within the organization. And and those that are listening at home, like when I say he's a top producer in the company, I mean, we don't write a small amount of business. We write a lot of business. So if he's a top producer here, he's more than likely a top producer in the entire state.
That's a good point.
And so he's at the top of the game. And then he says, all right, cool, no problem. Let's try this leadership thing, right? Even though I'm printing it and I'm maxing out comp and I'm going to go try to, teach 3-4 people to do what I do and be in charge of all these extra things that I don't necessarily have to do if I'm a salesperson. Like I talk to people all the time that are part of big corporations, like, yeah, they want me to be a manager and I'm not going to be a manager because I make less. It's like, okay, but what are you looking for? Like, what's your track? What's your ascent? What's the thing look like? Like, are you not willing to take 1 step back to go 4 steps forward? Like, there's a lot of people that don't think that way. They just think, oh, this just doesn't make sense financially. But you're now inheriting 4 people's problems for your own, with maybe some little upside, but inherently it's a whole new skill set.
Yes,
you embody that. And there was a time period where your production dropped, right? Because you didn't know how to toggle back and forth between this leadership thing and
my
and
production
sales
identity,
thing.
yeah.
And at some point, the exact same thing happened in every single position. You righted the ship and you figured out how to do both, and you did it at a high level to the point where everybody's qualifying on your team, right? And so it wasn't like you stepped into a leadership role and you just weren't having success. You stepped into a leadership role and everyone was having success. And then the next part of the game comes. And I transitioned to say that you said something earlier that said, what if? And I don't know who says it. I think it's, I don't know where we got it from, but it's somebody way more intelligent than me, but he basically said, like, you might not know what you want to be or where you want to do, but sometimes it makes more sense to go, what do I not want to do? Who do I not want to be? Like, start there. Like, it's like this opposite mindset. Like, what if, I don't want that. So if I don't want that, I'm 100% certain about that. Well, then I know that I need to do this. I might not know where this is going, but I know where this other way is going, and I know that is not what I want. And I think that's sometimes even more profound and powerful for people, because we don't always know where the next door is going to be. We don't always know where we're going. But if we could define what we don't want, then inherently we can have at least enough pull along the way until we figure it out. And so now this opportunity, I don't want to jump you, but I wanted to kind of give a summary there, because there's a pattern in your story here. And it's funny that you say you're a big proponent of modeling. Well, it's obvious. It's obvious because the results speak for themselves, right? You take the leap, you take the jump, you don't understand how to do it. You didn't know how to do it before you took the opportunity, but you knew you'd figure it out. You find somebody who's done it successfully. You model what they do. You ascend to the top of the game, and then you look for the next challenge, which is kind of where we are today.
Yeah, 100%. We build the plane in the air. I love that analogy. I use it all the time.
Build the plane in the air.
Let's build the plane while we're in the air.
My stomach just dropped.
We'll figure it out. But the leadership one, I think the pattern for me, even if you take that story right there, which I think is pretty accurate, I, in the leadership role, began to care a lot about everybody else eating, and to the point where I would sacrifice mine to build them up. And I say that just because that's just the way my brain goes. My mindset is, okay.
I remember having this conversation with you.
Yeah, we had a
to the point where I'm like,
about this.
oh God, you're gonna get me all excited.
You're perceiving
right now.
as binary. Either they can qualify or they can hit their numbers, or I can continue to be a top producer. But there's got to be. Is that what you're thinking at the time?
Yeah,
there's got to be a trade-off.
At the time, you think there can't be
do
both.
both.
There can't be both, which is a limiting mindset anyway. But the mindset at the time was, okay, how do we jumpstart everybody else and see how much we can? I know I can do it. Because then you hit that level of belief where all of a sudden you've done it several times. You're going, I'm not worried about me. And then go back to that mindset we've talked about where all of a sudden now you took your foot off the gas, you let everybody else kind of build up. And then when you start to go back, you're going, okay, well, what's the next challenge? What's the next thing that I want to do? Is this what I want to do? It's like, well, I do like this, but maybe there's something else. And then we'll probably get into it, but then you get into, hey, by the way, this is pretty cool right here, and you're doing pretty good. You got a nice little position, but there's this thing over here that we're doing that's new. We don't know what it's going to look like, but this is what we want to do with it. And that transitions into something else. So then you're always, the mindset I've always had is like, okay, do what you have to do to be successful there and model somebody and figure it out. Once you can figure it out, okay, do you want to keep doing that, or is there something else that you want to?
It's funny. I think this modeling conversation, right? So Torey comes in, and you kind of followed Matt, right? It's like you modeled Matt all the 100%. Way. Matt had the first position there ever was at every position, at every stop, right. And you modeled him right along behind him. Basically, were his successor in that position, made it better, moved on yourself, and replaced yourself. And I laugh because Matt went off to be an IO. Torey bought his house.
I know.
That's great.
All right. It's like I was Matt's roommate. Matt leaves. I'm just going to buy your house.
Bro.
I mean, that's like a great house.
See you later.
What a cool.
Why would I move?
Right. It's like I'm already here. I mean, I'll just buy it.
I'll just call him on.
Just what do you think? We'll
that's funny.
Yeah,
Man.
he's helped tremendously. If I could take 2 seconds to say, Matt Eckberg's a stud. Checks in the mail, Matt. He's honestly somebody that you want to talk about modeling. He's probably been the closest person to me that I've and he's younger than me. He's so damn smart, but he's been pivotal for me. Not only just recruiting me in, but also just being able to, watch what he did, take what I can borrow, get rid of the things I don't like, and make it my own and keep going.
Dude, you just articulated something about the modeling aspect of this, and let me figure out somebody who's doing, and then make it isn't that what an entrepreneur does? Like, I feel like we have these misconceived notions of like what an quote unquote entrepreneur does, right? I think what an entrepreneur does well is they have the confidence to go into the unknown because they'll figure it out. They have that like figure it outness, right? I'll be resourceful enough that when I run into roadblocks that I don't know something, I will find the resource that helps me solve that problem. And I will do that over and over and over again, and I will solve problems for profit. To me, that's an entrepreneur. Yeah. I feel like society sometimes looks at an entrepreneur and they're like, they got to cast this big vision and create this new product that anybody's ever seen before and do it in a way that it's marketed where no one's, it's just like, that's not how it works. Like, yeah, there are once in generational people when you think of like a Steve Jobs or something like that you think of when you think of that level of entrepreneur. But for the rest of the people in business, like it's more about what you did. So I get a kick at, you saying, hey, I don't really have like the entrepreneurial itch. And I'm like, dude, everything you just said about your story is like what an entrepreneur does, right? And by the way, all the other stuff that is attributed to entrepreneurs, a lot of that is like tinkering. That is doing stuff that's distracting, doesn't make them money, and they end up building businesses that they don't want to be a part of and that aren't successful and aren't worth anything because they didn't have the humility to just say, hey, who's already doing what I want to do? Let me just model what they do. And then if that spins off in a level of uniqueness that's beautiful and it works, great. But I'm very inspired by that because, again, it demystifies what an entrepreneur is and it simplifies.
Good point.
Well, and I'd give there's one missing piece to that. I'd argue that there's one missing piece to that process from an entrepreneur perspective, and that is taking risk, taking the burden of risk. And that's kind of where you are today, right? It's like, hey, look, man, I know this utility. I've done this before. The process is the same. If you're going to tell me that this is what the process looks like, Taylor, okay, great. Well, I've done that
Meaning
4
the
times.
Same position I'm in. I've already done
it.
It requires, but I just have
now
the risk
it's
is
like,
on
okay,
me.
you're telling me the next step is for me to bear the burden of the risk, not someone else, right? I've been a solopreneur. I'm not a solopreneur. I've been an entrepreneur perspective. I've enterprised something inside a confined, risk-free bubble. Now the next step is for me to take those skills that I've stacked, which I love what you say, skill stacked, and be able to take this out on outside of the bubble and enterprise something to where the risk is mine. Man, that sounds terrifying and exciting all at the same time. So talk to us about that. That's where you are today. You know, Torey is the owner-operator of his own agency in Tampa. We're in his 5th month now. He bought an agency. We bought an agency together down there, and it's been fun to say the least to unpack that. But you know, the idea of leaving a big income, a successful pedigree, something that you've worked hard to climb to the top of that quote unquote arbitrage mountain that we all think about, and the idea to go to the start, which is not only go to zero. But to take your own money that you've saved up and that you've built and put it into an asset that you don't know what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
You think you do because you've been doing it a long time. It's a perceived calculated risk. But
modeling.
At the same time, it's not. It's your money. It's your time. It's your risk. It's your name, you know, and it's not like you left something to where you're trying to figure out what the next step is. You had something really good. What motivates a person to do that and why?
What's wrong with you?
I know, right? God, man. No, I think it's the longer I got into, and I'm just going off the cuff here and just telling you guys from the heart. I think the more I got into my own development, and the more I got into what tools that I found valuable to use in order to, I call it leveling up. I don't know what the right word is for it.
It's a great word.
But leveling up. Okay, so what's next for you? So and also, you know, to pair this, I did meet a girl, so that kind of, you know, helped.
There's
out.
always a
There's
girl.
always a girl. That's how every story starts.
That's
too,
right.
I met a girl.
I met a girl. Is there a song about that?
There should be. There's
Country
probably
song, probably.
But what was the next thing? So, you know, then it becomes, well, then I think to use that as an example, I think all that did was make me look a little more inside and say, okay, now what do you really want? Is it time to make another big change? And also, are you comfortable right now? And I always come back to, are you comfortable or are you uncomfortable? And if you're comfortable, we got to find a way to put the on it. We got to find a way to put the on it, because if you're too comfortable for too long, you get complacent. And I know that about myself because I keep using the same word, but I've stacked up some tools and some skills that have worked for me in my specific life. And one of the trademarks is that when I get too comfortable, I feel it now. After 10 years of doing it, I feel complacent. You get that heavy feeling. You know, there's a heavy feeling whenever you're going, I'm not doing something right, or I'm not doing something enough. So what am I not doing right now? Or what do I need to do to get out of this heavy feeling so I get back to being lighter? We do a lot of work now with a gentleman who's fantastic, who's been on the podcast. And that's one thing that I've taken more than anything, is that when I feel heavy, there's a reason I'm feeling heavy. So all this kind of coincided and collided together. And going back to the competition feeling that I have, I heard a rumor. I won't say where I heard it, but I heard a rumor that there were going to be 3 independent operators for Urban Young. And then we were going to figure out from there if it's going to work, if it wasn't going to work, what we were going to do. And we had 2, and they were 2 really good guys. And I said, well, there is absolutely zero reason. And then that's where the competitive side comes in and said, well, this should be me. You know, I don't want to go anywhere outside. I don't want to do I don't want anybody else selfishly. That selfish part is kind of, I'm building that, you know. And I remember asking myself, how am I going to do that? Well, I don't know the first step. What's the first? And there was a lot of trial and error, as you guys probably know in the beginning.
There was. I remember those conversations. Well, what does that look like? Okay, well, a book of business comes up. Okay, well, how do we find a book of business, right? It's like, and then the book of business does come up. Yeah. Okay, but how do I get the money to put the down, you know, like,
what if I paid less? What if I did this? You know, it's like
all the things along the way.
You're negotiating with yourself. I'm negotiating with my partners at that time, trying to figure out, hey, how do I
give me a sign?
Yeah. Well, here are all the signs. There's
Not
3.
that sign. Give me a different sign.
Hey, you know what? Obviously, we're going to name this podcast Modeling, but because all you did, though, right? You look at the investment in the book of business, and you talk about taking the risk as an entrepreneur and into the unknown, as the Elsa says in Frozen. Into the unknown.
Wow, that's the first time singing on a podcast.
I think about Model the Model. That's a good title.
So you think about modeling, and you look at that. Oh, well, that's such great risk. No, it's not. It is risk, but you're sitting with 3 guys that had done it 5 times. And I remember you telling me, like, well, I'll just do what you guys did, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In this space at that time, we had enough experience. We don't have the most experience, but we had enough experience to know that, like, no, this is a really good investment. Here's how we execute it. Here's our plan. We've done this before. We learned what we've done well. We've learned what we've done poorly. And that takes some of the risk out. But you know what you need to have to model properly? Humility. You need to have enough humility that you don't have to be the one that figures it out all the time. It doesn't have to be your idea. It doesn't have to be the best idea. It just has to be a good enough idea for you to get the outcome that you're searching for.
Yeah.
And I give you so much props for having the humility to model, and it's just going to continue to serve you. And you know what the beauty of that is? By modeling, your own uniqueness speaks for itself. Like, there's one of one. There's only one Torey Scarbrough. When you walk in a room, it speaks for itself. Your energy speaks for itself. Your leadership is unique. And now you're leading. Brett says, I always joke about that. Like, Torey's my mentor. Like, Torey changed his life. Like, he literally is not a pretender anymore. And sometimes I feel like a pretender. And I can relate to that story and go, man, what would happen if I put in the work to see how far you've come? So, a little bit of a rant, but just
I appreciate it.
I love the rant. Modeling the model, though, right? It's like, to me, that's the antithesis. What's that word?
Antithesis.
That's a Mike Tyson.
You got that, you antithesis. I'm telling you something. I love this company. It's the antithesis of what I want to do.
There it is. No, but it's like, it's the playbook. It's the playbook. It's like, I love everything about what you said and how you tied it together.
It was the easiest answer.
So good.
The easiest way to figure out.
There's your mic drop.
When you have something like what you're talking about, where it's fun when you can do it within the walls, as you're talking about, this risk-free environment. But then you finally get to this point where you were very clear on every conversation we had that, hey man, it's on you. It's your name on it. This is your risk. This is how we've designed it. It's your baby. And there's a point where I think you were trying to probably get me to consider the fact that maybe you don't want to do this, or you? But have me make that decision to the point where maybe just intrinsically the easiest answer was, okay, well, those guys did it. All right, so what did you guys do? Well, let's just do what you guys did. Let's blueprint that, and let's go do it again.
Wow.
It seemed to have worked.
There's another short, Lorenzo.
There's a clue.
Hey guys, Brett Young with the Be Extraordinary podcast. Want to take a moment and just say thank you so much for listening. Without you guys listening, this wouldn't be possible. Appreciate you guys so much. If you have not subscribed to the podcast, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, everywhere. You can also go to beextraordinarypodcast.com and all of the feed, or you can watch the video playbacks and subscribe to any whichever podcast feed that you enjoy most. Lastly, if you've not joined the Be Extraordinary community, please go to the bottom of the website. Go to beextraordinarypodcast.com. Go to the bottom. You will see the Extraordinary community right there through Telegram. You literally just click the button. It's free. There's a bunch of other amazing professionals and individuals that live by this philosophy, having incredible dynamic conversations about what they experience every day and becoming better. So again, thank you so much for listening. You guys rock. Be extraordinary.
And to give the listeners at home, which I want to give you props on, so we're 5 months in.
Yeah.
Not even, right? And at this point, I believe we're close to replacing the income that you had when you were here.
From zero, Brett?
From zero.
So
number one, props to you, because I know you've worked really hard. Number two, it makes me excited for the future of this program, because I know we're doing something that's unique and that works really well. And then number three, for those of you that are home, God rewards, and whatever your belief is, the universe, God rewards risk. It rewards your we call it active faith. You took active faith into your own hands that says, I believe that this is where I'm called to be, and I'm going to take this adventure, because there's always this pull between exhilaration and security. This exhilaration of the adventure versus the security of the safe. And they're in constant conflict with each other. And it just, if you look at every great story in civilization, it's always predicated off of the decision of choosing exhilaration and adventure. And your story is no different than that, to the fact that here we are, you took this leap of faith and this plunge, and to have the rewards that quickly is not an accident. It's just not an accident. Well said. So I commend you, man. I commend you for the decision. And yes, I was trying to convince you not to do it, because what I've learned in this business, you don't want to convince people to do that. You don't. Yeah. That is a bad thing. You want to convince them not to do that. And then if they do it anyway, then they're just as stupid as you are. So they deserve all the rewards that they're going to get at the end of the rainbow.
There was definitely some mind stuff going on there, where every time you said, "Are you sure?" No, you didn't say that, but basically the way your language was, hey, just know this is on you, and this is what that entails. I mean, if you're ready for that, every time I would do that, I'm going, fuck, Brent, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it just because you're telling me that it's hard, and that's how it's always been. I think, honestly, going back to the modeling thing, the whole title of this podcast is gonna be modeling. But I'll tell you that I think if there's one thing now, 10 years later, that I could tell you that I have inherently, it's my mimicry. It's the memory recall to look at something and go and do that voice or do that look, whatever. And I think over time, I just did it to my professional life. I just figured out, okay, well, what do I do well? I can impersonate things. I can model things. Does that mean I'm still a pretender? I don't think so. But I can use that to my advantage and figure out that tool that I have and go do it. And this is just the next.
Allows you to quantify your talent.
Damn, that's profound.
Yeah.
So good, yeah.
That's profound.
So good.
I never made that connection between your ability to impersonate, between your ability to model a successful whatever.
Yeah.
That is. Thank you for sharing that in the way that you shared it.
I just think it's 10 years later, you figure those things out, and you're never there, right? There's never a pinnacle. If there's a pinnacle, you're complacent again, so there's never a pinnacle for me. It's just, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? After you've done something, you don't have to do it for 10 years to say you do it. Once you do it, you did it. Okay, now let's go to the next thing. Let's keep going that way. Otherwise you end up plateauing. And the one thing I've learned from being here is I don't want to plateau. I want to always be going after the next thing, whatever that is.
Well, the next one is breaking the $1 million plateau for you, brother. So,
yeah.
Heck yeah.
Man, before we sign off, I don't know if anybody has any, ending comments, but man, what a fun conversation this has been, huh?
I just want to say thank you, man. We joke about the early days, but you were just, throughout this whole experience, you've made me a better leader, better person, better teammate. You've challenged me in ways that I've come to appreciate more than ever, and I'm just grateful for our friendship too, man.
I'd echo that. The example that you show to your teammates, to us included, to your partners, I mean, it's powerful, dude. Powerful. Much respect. Much respect. Earned, not given.
Earned, not given. And, I'd tell you that, I say that you inspire me, but you reinforce this idea of be extraordinary, of creating extraordinary lives. Because, man, if I'm being transparent, there are days that I don't want to be extraordinary. There are days when I just don't want to do it. And there's days where I go, man, is this worthy? And then I see you and your commitment to this belief. And that's why that's so cool about what we're doing is this idea is just so, it transcends any one person. Mm-hmm. And to see someone else gravitate to the idea and for it to make such a profound impact in their life, but way more importantly, a ripple effect to the people around them, it allows me to get up in the morning and look in the mirror and say, one more day, right? It's like that it's like the Ed Milet thing. One more, it's like, dude, you today you're going to commit to the idea. You might not, some days I might wake up for my partner. Sometimes I might wake up for me. Sometimes I might wake up for my wife. Sometimes I might wake up for the team. But when I look at your journey and what you've done, it makes me wake up for the idea that we've all
set out to bring to life. And it's one thing if it was I got goosebumps. It's one thing if it's the three of us because, it birthed there, but to see it cross over now and for it to just be so alive in somebody like you, and to go from employee to partner and to completely change your life, man, I can't even quantify how fulfilling that is, and it makes me want to put it up one more time. It makes me want to run one more rep. It makes me want to do one more set. So for that, I just appreciate you being an example, man.
Well, I thank you guys, and if I could close you guys down here, I thank each and every one of you guys, because what you're talking about is what got me through 10 years. When you would come, a company is only good as the people you keep. And we kept some great people on these walls, and every single one of them, you guys included, I knew that what was Rod reading last night? What was Taylor doing? What was Brett doing? What did Brett learn that I now know? So you were always constantly looking to do the same thing, and that's the only thing that I will tell you here and now on this podcast that got me through 10 years. I'm sorry, I'm in 8 or 9 years now. The only thing that got me through that was knowing that somebody else was putting in the work and I wasn't. So let's start putting in the work, and you guys are a big part of that, obviously.
That's cool, man.
Amen, bro.
The secret of culture. So, well, man, for everybody that's listening, I just want to say thank you. I told you this one was going to be a good one. There's just so many nuggets that I just picked up from having this conversation. So, as you go about your day and about your week and about your month, man, I just more than ever as a perfect example of Torey's story. Man, life is boring when it's ordinary, man. It's so much better if it's just extraordinary. So put in the work, do the deal. See you guys at the top. Bye-bye for now.